Hey guys, welcome to week 2 of our distance learning. Super exciting week ahead of us. We are going to finish our Roll of Thunder Hear My Cry book. You guys, I wish that we were together, and I wish that we were reading these things and talking about these people and the feelings and the emotions. It just makes me sad that we're not talking through all of this together and reading it with each other. So make sure that you are sending me emails if you have questions or want to talk about any of the big stuff in this book because I miss you. So I want to start off today talking about chapter 9, which was your last assignment for last week. So I just want to hit on a couple things from chapter 9 before talking about what your assignment is, your first assignment for this week with chapter 10. I'm sitting outside right now because I needed some fresh air. If you hear my dog bark, I apologize, but we just needed to be outside. Plus, all of my children and my husband are all inside, so this was just a little quiet place for me to go. Okay, so first, if we are looking at chapter 9, I want you to look at page 196. I just thought this was funny and something that I needed to point out. On page 196, she's talking about like the changes of spring and the crops and fields and the birds chirping and all of that stuff. And she says, but although every living thing knew that it was spring, Miss Crocker and the other teachers evidently did not, for school lingered on indefinitely. Now, how much have we all felt those feelings come springtime when we are just itching for summer break and it feels like, hello, everything outside says it's spring, it's summer, but we are stuck here in school. And then I thought, oh, right now, most of us, maybe, are just wishing we could be in school. Instead of having that same spring fever, summer fever, we're just wishing that we could actually be in those walls and be together a little bit. I just thought that was kind of funny that that was the time frame for this chapter. And then we need to talk a little bit about this reference that Jeremy makes to RJ and Melvin. Remember, RJ and Melvin are not TJ's. RJ and Melvin are Jeremy's older brothers. Lily and Jean is his sister. RJ and Melvin are his two older brothers. So they're older, late teenager white boys. And he talks about their friendship with TJ. Because he's talking about how he is going to miss the Logans because they get out of school early because they all have to work in the fields. And so he's like, well, I'm just going to miss having you guys around and all of that stuff. And he said he doesn't like his big brothers. You should see the way they treat TJ. And then he kind of catches himself because he probably shouldn't be bad-mouthing his brothers, doesn't want to get in trouble. Plus he knows the past with Stacy and TJ. So Stacy kind of gets defensive and he's like, wait, what's going on? How are they treating him badly? And even though he and TJ have had a falling out, he's still, kind of protective of him and wants to know what's going on. And we hear as the chapter goes on how TJ's kind of going off the rails a little bit. His parents don't really have control over him. He fights back with his mom and his dad. He's sassy and he's mouthy and he's hanging out with the Wallaces and the Averys, and they just kind of don't have control over him anymore. And he doesn't really have anyone keeping him grounded and keeping him making good choices. So that's going to keep being important as the story goes forward. So that little development with TJ, RJ, and Melvin is kind of important with those characters. And then I want you to flip ahead if you've got your book and you're following along with me. Flip ahead to page 203. And we have some important stuff that happens in these couple chapters, or these few pages. So on 203, Mr. Avery, that's TJ's dad, but Mr. Avery and Mr. Lanier show up to talk to Mama and Papa Logan. And they basically say, we got to back out of this Vicksburg thing. We can't shop there anymore. We have to go back on our word a little bit. As much as they don't like the Wallaces and don't like what they're doing, they said, we can't do this anymore, like having you shop for us in Vicksburg. And the whole reason is, right in the middle of page 203, it says, Mr. Granger making it hard on us, David. Said we're gonna have to give him 60% of the cotton instead of 50. Now that the cotton's planted, it's too late to plant more. Don't suppose that, though, that it makes that much difference. The way cotton sells these days, seems the more we plant, the less money we get anyway. But, so they basically said, Granger, who is their landowner, has said, oh, you're going to make that decision to not shop at the Wallace store? I'm going to take more of your money. Or you don't get to sharecrop on my land anymore. And this is that whole thing that we've talked about since the beginning of this book, is how these sharecroppers are stuck. I mean, they're in this cycle of oppression because if they lose their ability to live on Granger land and at least in some small way provide for their family, they lose everything. And so if Granger's like putting his thumb on him saying, no, you have to give me more of your money if you're going to do this, they are in this position where they're like, we can't do it. We can't give him even more than he's already taking from us. So they're having to back out. And the Wallaces are going to win. And Granger's going to win because they are in the power position. And that's just the way, unfortunately, things went in their society. I'm sorry, my crazy dog is barking at neighbors who are out walking. I don't know if you can see him running hot laps behind me. So then we hear, like, Papa goes out and he has to find out, like, okay, who else is still in this thing? And he finds like 7 families, which is still decent, but he's like, that's not enough. It's not enough to really hurt the Wallaces in terms of their financial situation. Makes a statement, which is important, but it's not enough to really do what they were hoping, which was, put a big hurt on their business and put them in a tough situation where they would change. They're not going to do that. Last thing that we need to talk about is the whole thing that happens with Papa and Mr. Morrison and Stacy on the way home from Vicksburg, because Papa says we're still going. They go and make this shopping trip. And Mama knew, us mamas, we know things. We have these gut feelings, and we know when things are right and things are wrong. And Mama knew that he should not be going. She just had this feeling that something bad was going to happen. And she was right. So on page 214, that whole situation starts with their trip home. They come back home with Papa. Mr. Morrison is carrying him. They'd been out on the road. It was rainstorm. I mean, obviously they can't control the thunderstorm. That just worked in their attackers' favor. But it's thundering and lightning and storming. And so they're in their carriage trying to make it home. And the back wheels fall off of the wagon. And they're like, that doesn't just happen normally. Something was messing around with the wagon. And Stacy was like, oh yeah, I saw these kids near the wagon. I bet that had something to do with it. So somebody set them up, first of all, that they would end up stuck on the side of the road. So that was part of the plan. So the back wheels fall off, and Mr. Morrison just picks up the whole wagon. Like, he's gonna be the horse that carries it home, essentially. That was what they were doing. And then all of a sudden the car, Papa's under the wagon, like trying to put the wheels into place. And as he's down there, the truck goes by, headlights off, so they couldn't see, and they start firing. Papa gets skimmed along the side. This is your temple, where it's talking about. So it was like, right, just literally grace of God that it didn't do more damage, but just skinned him along the side of his head. And then because he was down there messing with the wheels, the gunshots spooked the horses. So the horse jolted and Stacy couldn't keep the horse in, and that made the wagon roll, and the front wheels went backwards and rolled over Papa's leg, which broke his leg. So Stacy feels guilty because he feels like he should have been able to hang onto the horses, which is not true. But then Mr. Morrison got into a physical altercation with the other guys, left one of them smashed in the road. We think broke another one's arm. So it's not going to be too hard to figure out going forward who these people were, because they're gonna have some damage. So the plus side is that Stacy and Papa and Mr. Morrison made it home. The downside is that these tensions are escalating, and so some of these things are getting real, and the conflicts are getting increasingly dangerous. And so it will be intriguing to see what happens this week. It is a perfect assignment as we go into chapter 10. So you'll read what happens next, and I'll talk about chapter 10 in the next video. But the assignment right now, after reading chapter 10, is what happened and why. It's a cause and effect, right? So we've seen the start of that here in this chapter. These things become really important. And the examples go way back to the start of the story, these cause and effect things, because we want to keep making sure that we're thinking of our story all together. But we want to look at, because of this was the result. And our chapter 9 was a very clear evidence of that. Because these families chose to start shopping in Vicksburg, Granger was, gonna charge his sharecroppers more of their profits, and ultimately Mr. Morrison and Papa were physically attacked because of that. Cause and effect. The choices that we make have consequences. And so all of these things, we see that throughout the story. So what values are important enough to us in life that we're willing to face the consequences? And that question will become a key question in the end of this book. So I've talked for too long, as I typically do, but I just miss talking about this book with you. Enjoy reading chapter 10, looking at the cause and effect as you fill this out. I should have explained this. On some of them, it gives you the cause, and then you write in, okay, because of this, what happened? On some of the examples, it gives you the effect. This was the result, and you have to think about what caused that. Okay? So you're trying to make those connections between the events in the story and this led to this, or we have this event. What brought that about in the story, and really looking at those plot developments in the story. So making those cause and effect connections for this week. I will be back with lesson number 2 for the week. Sorry, my dog is barking. And I will talk about chapter 10 and talk about the next assignment. Miss you guys. Bye.